Hello Steelers, and welcome to this review of the Armchair General, or subtitled Can You Defeat the Nazis by John Buckley, actually Professor John Buckley. John Buckley is a professor of war studies down at Wolverhampton, at least at the time of recording of this, and he is an absolute expert on the Second World War, if nothing else. Now, I first heard about this book on Henry Hyde's podcast when he was interviewing Spencer Jones, who is a doctor mostly in the war and the First World Wars, but he was talking about this book and I had to go and check it out, and I'm really glad I did, to be honest. This is going to be quite a glowing review of this book. It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, it is almost, I would say, almost unique. Now, I'd probably say that most of the people watching this video like myself can probably remember fighting fantasy books. There were books that were developed by Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson back in the 80s as an offshoot from Games Workshop, separately, but you know, when they were working for Games Workshop towards the end, and they were choose your own adventures. So basically you would read a passage, it would have some decisions at the end of the passage, and you went to a different passage numbered depending on where you wanted to go on your adventure. Some of these would lead to dead ends, some of these would lead you towards the end of the adventure itself. And there was lots of different types of them. There was the I think lone wolf versions of them. There was even, I even remember, I think a famous 5 one that I had, and an asterisk one. So you know, they were everywhere. They were ubiquitous, definitely in the 80s. They kind of died off a little bit, but they have kind of come back a little bit more. But why am I talking about those? Well, because this is almost similar. It's an alternative history book, but with choices. Now, what do I mean by that? An alternative history is basically where, you know, the historian will look at the possibility of something changing slightly in history. You know, if somebody had made a different decision, if they'd gone left rather than right, or you know, if a certain politician had been chosen to go into power over another one, what would the outcomes be? And I think some of the more famous ones are probably some of the novels, things like Fatherland. I think it's by Robert Harris, is it? Where, you know, England has been invaded by the Nazis and it's been run by the SS and that kind of thing. Stuff where it's probably a little bit beyond what would have really happened in the world. It's, you know, they're fantasy kind of things. But there are quite a lot of historians that do look at alternative histories as part of their, you know, as part of their remit as well, just because they're exploring the possibilities of different outcomes, really, and that's kind of what this book is about. But it's a little bit more than that, because, as I say, it's almost like a fighting fantasy book in that at the end of each section in this, you end up with a choice, and then you follow the choice. You can either follow the historical choice or you can follow the ahistorical choice, and both of those go on different paths. What I'll do first of all, though, is I'm just going to tell you exactly what is in the book, and it's split into chapters. There are 8 chapters in total. It's about 400 and odd pages, which sounds a lot, but actually it isn't. And the contents of it are: we've got number 1, Britain's Darkest Hour, summer 1940. Number 2, the Mediterranean Gamble, the war in North Africa, 41 to 42. Stalin's War, the war on the Eastern Front, 41 to 45. Midway, Decision in the Pacific, June 42. The Bomber Offensive, Strategy, Morality and the Road to Dresden, 40 to 45. Casablanca, Roosevelt and Churchill, Strategic Choices, 43 to 44. Race to the Rhine, Arnhem and Operation Market September 44. And then finally, The Bomb, Copenhagen, Manhattan and Hiroshima, 41 to 45. So, as you can tell, it's very much Western theatre influenced. There's no great problem. I mean, you know, there's only one real chapter on the Eastern Front, and it kind of covers all of the Eastern Front. I think that would probably be my the most negative thing I could say about it, as I would like to have seen a bit more on the Eastern Front. It's a bit more of a whitewash, but obviously John's expertise lies in the Western Front and in those particular theatres, so you can understand why he's probably going for that, but at least he's covering the back end of it. Now, interestingly, I mean, you know, there are I think it's a really good book, and the things that stand out to me, well, let me just explain as well. Each of the sections are split down to about 50 pages. So when I say, you know, it's about 400 pages, you could probably sit down and read, you know, a section in about an hour. It was taking me about that much, and some people probably read faster, some may read slower, but it was taking me about an hour to read a section. So it's like a nice book you can dip into on a nice summer's day, when it was a nice summer's day a few weeks ago, and I was sitting in the garden reading this. And each of those sections, each of those chapters are then split into about, I think they're all about the same. They're about 7 sections. So you get an introduction. It basically sets up the situation for you. So whichever one you're doing, you're reading through. So let's go with the first one. 1940, Britain faces the Nazis. Almost alone. The Conservative Party are trying to choose between Churchill or Lord Halifax as their new Prime Minister to lead them in the war. Now, again, people who are watching this channel probably already know what the outcome of that is. However, you do have the 2 choices. And what is nice as well, at the start of it's each decision, you also have a little aid memoir as well, which just reminds you of what has already been said, and gives you kind of the arguments for and against the 2 decisions that you're just one of the 2 decisions you're about to make. And also as well, it has some of the original or at least facsimiles of the original orders or memorandums or maps and things like that were also given, so you can read those, and those are historical. They are things that were actually written at the time, so that also gives you, feeds you a little bit more into your decision, and then you basically just work your way through those decisions, and it tells you how things turn out. Now, if you choose Lord Halifax, because it is a sober look at history by a professor of history rather than just some fantasy novel that's just been written, the actual outcomes are probably quite surprising for you as well. It's not as though Halifax suddenly surrenders to the Germans and then we have SSGB all over Britain. It's just other things happen. There's a bit more of an appeasement to the Germans. There's a bit more, maybe some other things don't happen. I'm not giving anything away here. I don't think Churchill was a Prime Minister in the Second World War, as we all probably know. So it's interesting to explore what potentially would have happened, because he's taken their own diaries and their own thoughts and their own meetings that they've been in as well, to kind of to put together what is a pretty rational thought process from a for a potential historical outcome that obviously didn't happen. So there's nothing too outlandish here. Generally, in most cases, the war probably just ends up going on a couple more years, because Germany was never going to win, and Japan certainly was never going to win as soon as they attacked Pearl Harbor. These are already set in stone historically. It's not going to, just wasn't going to happen. So it's interesting from that point of view, just to see how the path of the war may have slightly changed. Personally, I enjoyed every single one of these sections. As I say, I would like to have seen a little bit more on the Eastern Front, but that's just me. The thing that I liked the most of it was when I didn't actually know the history behind the particular action or the particular area or the theatre it was talking about. And in particular, the one that stood out to me was the Battle of Midway. Now, I know the Battle of Midway happened. I know that it was between the Japanese and the American navies. But beyond that, I didn't really know a great deal more about it. I know it was like carrier strikes, an aircraft against carriers, but I didn't know very much more about it. So this actually taught me quite a lot about it. And because of that, because I didn't know what the actual historical decisions were, I had a vague idea. It kind of gave me a little bit more of a push to think more in terms of which decision do I actually make here? Do I get the Douglas Dauntless pilot to fly north or to fly south when he's searching for the Japanese Navy? And I literally had no idea which area the Japanese Navy were in at that particular point. And I think that's a really good way of, that's probably the standout part of this book, I think. When I was reading it was, as I say, the bits that I had less knowledge of, less general knowledge of, and I think that was I think that is really where it starts to shine itself, and I think it's great. Again, I've learnt a lot from reading this, and just how political decisions are made and why they were made, and the situations surrounding those decisions that were made as well. That's also important. So although it is alternative history in inverted commas, it is also incredibly interesting just to see what people were facing at the time, how they all thought about it. And just to say as well, you are, in this you are playing a role. You are, in each section you play a different role. Generally, an advisor to somebody who is making those decisions. So it's up to you to advise them which way or the other. You're not Stalin. You're Stalin's advisor. It's that kind of thing. You're not Churchill or Halifax. You're their advisor. You're one of I think it's the chief whip of the Tory party at the time, and they're the ones that are, making those decisions or advising their bosses basically to make that choice either way. I think, as I say, I think it's a really, really terrific, excellent thing. It works on so many levels. As I say, just as an enjoyable read, even if you know the history of all the actions in here, if you know what the right decision was to make at the time, it's still interesting to explore what might have happened, and you find yourself going back, hurriedly going back to find what might have happened. And I think it's excellent. It's really good. Well worth it. I'll put a link for it in Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon. I don't know if it's paperback, but I got mine in hardback. I know it's been out quite a while now. I think it's quite old. This one is retailing at $14.99, published by Century, and 2021. So it's only a couple of years old actually. And one of the reasons, I'm just going to say this as well. One of the reasons that I did read this and I got this and read it. Spencer Jones had mentioned it, but he mentioned that he and John are also working on a First World War version of this as well at the moment. I don't know when it's set for publishing, but hopefully very soon. And I think it's a great way of just exploring stuff. As a wargamer as well, the Wargaming channel, so let's talk about it from a wargaming point of view. Once again, it just gives you a good overview of the actions of the Second World War, or some of the actions of the Second World War, and some of those political and background decisions. And I believe as well that John is also I think he certainly puts on war games for his students. From what I've gathered from Spencer Jones's various podcast appearances, when he's mentioned him, I think he is a war gamer. I don't think it's too much of a stretch. So again, it's nice, it's interesting. It's a book written by wargamers with that in mind, I guess. It's like a game book, and something that is, because of its historical background, it is something that is very, very unique in that sense as well. Well worth your few pounds, I think. So yeah, I'll put a link to a description in. I'll put a link to the book in the description down below, and I would thoroughly recommend this. I think it's excellent. So I was all the way through this, I was reading it and I was thinking about doing a review because I've just enjoyed it so much. All right, I shall leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you have, leave a comment. If you have, also check out the book as well. And if you haven't, do subscribe to the channel. It all helps. And I'll see you in the next Storm of Steel video.